Welcome to Zoe Stories. Doctor warned me. Only living as a girl could save my life. The specialist's office smelled sharply of cleaning chemicals and fresh paint, a sterile scent that should have reassured me, but instead made my stomach twist. The walls were pale gray, the fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead, and every surface glinted as if to emphasize how clinical, how controlled this place was. I sat on the edge of the exam table, my hands gripping the worn vinyl so tightly my knuckles ached. My brown hair, usually kept neat, had gone wild from constant nervous running of fingers through it, and my navy blue t-shirt clung loosely around my thin frame, emphasizing just how much weight I had lost in the last few months. "Your test results are clear," Dr. Martinez said, setting down her tablet with a careful precision. Her eyes, however, were far from calm. Concern rippled across her face, and that subtle crease between her brows made my heart rate spike. "Clear?" I echoed, though the word felt hollow. My stomach churned, a heavy knot forming in my gut. "What do you mean, clear?" She inhaled slowly, as if choosing her words could somehow soften the blow. "When your body is attacking its own testosterone. It's producing antibodies that target the hormone itself. Essentially, your system perceives testosterone as a threat." I laughed nervously, a sound that came out more like a strangled cough. That's impossible. Bodies don't just attack their own hormones." "I know," she said gently. "It's extremely rare. Worldwide, there are only 17 documented cases." 17. My mind spun as she pulled up charts on her tablet. Liver enzymes, 3 times the normal level. Kidney function down 30% in just 1 month. My pulse quickened, blood rushing to my head as I tried to make sense of the numbers. Each statistic was a nail in the coffin, yet somehow abstract, numbers on a screen that didn't feel real. "How long?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. "Without treatment, 6 months, maybe less." The lights above hummed in my ears as I stared at a poster of the human body pinned on the wall. I tried to wrap my mind around the words, the numbers, the impossibility of it all. My hands were trembling, and when I looked down at them, they seemed alien, thin, fragile, somehow not my own. "There has to be a treatment," I said, my voice cracking. "Medications, therapies, something. Anything." Dr. Martinez adjusted her glasses, the lenses catching the light. "There is one approach that has shown success in similar cases. We stop your body's testosterone production entirely and replace it with estrogen." My stomach lurched violently. "Female hormones?" "Yes. Estrogen doesn't trigger the autoimmune response. It would allow your body to recover. But the changes, physical changes, would be significant. Breast development, fat redistribution, softer skin, muscle mass changes. Essentially, your body would feminize. But you would live." The room tilted. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly I thought my fingers might snap. "There has to be another way. Immunosuppressants, experimental treatments." She nodded, her face tight with sympathy. "We can try, but in every documented case, they only delayed the inevitable. Your immune system is too aggressive." Patients in Germany lasted 8 months, in Japan 11, before organ failure. Both eventually transitioned to estrogen to survive, but by then, the damage was irreversible. I felt my chest tighten. Die as a man or live as someone whose body runs on estrogen instead of testosterone. My voice faltered as the weight of the choice crushed me. "So, that's it? My options?" "Yes," she said softly. "I know it's overwhelming, but treatment must begin within 2 weeks to prevent permanent organ damage." The drive home was a blur of streetlights and fragmented thoughts. I kept seeing flashes of my old life, my apartment, my familiar routines, but nothing felt real anymore. Everything seemed foreign, including my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man staring back at me wasn't the man I remembered. My hair had grown unruly, my face thinner, my eyes sunken from worry and fatigue. My phone buzzed, a message from my sister, Rachel. How did it go? I ignored it, letting the vibration die against the counter. I couldn't face anyone yet. I couldn't face myself. 3 days later, I returned to Dr. Martinez's office. Dark circles had settled deeper under my eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I sat down. "I've decided to proceed," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Her relief was subtle but unmistakable. She handed me a thick folder. "This contains everything: the transition process, support resources, what to expect. Hormone blockers first, then gradual estrogen introduction." "How quickly will I change?" I asked, almost fearing the answer. "Everyone responds differently. Some changes happen within weeks, others months or years. We'll monitor your levels closely." I swallowed hard, my mind spinning with images of breasts forming, hips widening, skin softening. Every thought felt surreal, almost impossible to imagine. I had always identified as Edwin, as male, and now my body was preparing to betray, or save, me in the most intimate way possible. The first injection was anticlimactic, a small needle, a brief sting, then nothing. I expected a rush, a sudden shift. Instead, I drove home feeling unchanged, except for the tiny band-aid on my arm, a marker of a decision that would reshape everything. 2 weeks later, the fatigue that had haunted me began to lift. Blood work improved. Dr. Martinez increased the estrogen dose. I felt different, though I couldn't yet define how. My emotions seemed closer to the surface. Tears came easily at commercials. Laughter bubbled up without reason. I felt exposed, fragile, but alive. By the 6th week, changes were undeniable. My chest felt tender, my jeans fit differently, my reflection softer, unfamiliar. "I need new clothes," I muttered in my follow-up. "Some patients find experimenting with style helpful," Dr. Martinez said gently. I nodded numbly, already realizing that nothing about the world, my clothes, or even my reflection would ever feel the same again. The drive home from the specialist's office felt unreal, as if I were suspended between two worlds. The city lights blurred past the windshield, streaks of yellow and red painting the dark night, but none of it registered. My mind was caught in a storm, each thought colliding with the next. I kept repeating the words Dr. Martinez had spoken. "Your body is attacking its own testosterone. The only way to survive is to replace it with estrogen." I clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Estrogen. Female hormones. Feminization. The word twisted in my stomach like a living thing. What would it do to me? To who I was? At home. My apartment felt like a stranger's space. Everything seemed foreign. The furniture, the shadows cast by the streetlights through the blinds, even my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I stared at myself for long moments, tracing my face, counting the fine lines, the hollows under my eyes. This face had always been mine, and yet I felt detached from it now, as if it were a mask I was about to be forced to wear differently. The phone buzzed with another message from Rachel. "You haven't replied. Are you okay?" I ignored it, setting it aside. I couldn't explain this yet, not even to her. How could I? The words didn't exist in our reality. They didn't make sense. For the next 3 days, I vacillated between denial and panic. I researched every possible treatment option, delving into medical journals, online forums, and case studies. Immunosuppressants. Experimental therapies. Anything that might let me hold onto the identity I'd always known. But every story ended the same way: temporary relief, worsening organ failure, a final choice that could not be avoided. I began to feel trapped in my own body, a prison I couldn't escape. My muscles felt weaker, my joints achy, my energy sapped. Fatigue that had been my constant companion over the past months seemed almost unbearable now. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly, couldn't think straight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I returned to Dr. Martinez's office. My reflection in the mirror that morning had seemed like a stranger staring back. Dark circles framed my eyes, my hair hung limp and unkempt around my face. I almost didn't recognize myself. "I've decided to proceed with the treatment," I whispered, my voice trembling. Saying it aloud made it real. The words clung to the air like a confession. Dr. Martinez's face softened in relief. "I'm glad." "This folder," she said, handing me a thick bundle of papers, "contains everything. The treatment process, what to expect, and support resources. We'll start with hormone blockers to stop testosterone production, then gradually introduce estrogen." I nodded numbly, unable to focus on the words. My mind was racing ahead, imagining months of slow transformation. Breast development, softer skin, fat redistribution, muscle loss, hips widening, my chest tender, my jeans tighter in the wrong places. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to refuse, to deny, to cling to Edwin, the version of me that had existed without this horrifying choice. But then there was fear. Raw, unrelenting fear. 6 months. Maybe less. Without treatment, I would die. My liver, my kidneys, my life was slipping away, counted in increments of failing organs and weakening systems. I drove home in silence, the city rushing past like a dream. Every red light felt like a judgment, every honking horn a reminder of the impossibility of what lay ahead. At home, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. The first injection arrived 2 days later. I watched the nurse prepare the small vial, my hands clammy, my heart hammering in my chest. The needle pricked my arm, a tiny sting, over in a second. Nothing else. I expected fireworks, a sudden rush, a transformation. But the only thing I felt was the weight of the decision pressing on my chest. Days passed. Subtle changes began to creep in almost imperceptibly. My energy returned slightly. The crushing fatigue lifted bit by bit. I noticed my skin softening, my emotions more volatile, my laughter coming easier, and my tears arriving unexpectedly. Watching a commercial about rescued animals, I cried. Alone in my apartment, I laughed at my own reaction. The world seemed sharper, brighter, and yet more alien than ever. By the 4th week, my body began signaling its transformation. My chest was tender. My jeans sat differently around my hips. My reflection was changing, softer, unfamiliar. I no longer recognized the man I had been. "I need new clothes," I muttered at Dr. Martinez during my next appointment, a strange mix of awe and panic in my voice. "That's common at this stage," she said gently. "Some patients find it helpful to explore their presentation, to experiment with style as their body changes." I nodded, swallowing hard. The thought of wandering into a department store, looking at women's clothing, imagining myself in skirts and blouses, it was terrifying. And yet, part of me was curious, eager even, for a sense of alignment between body and presentation that I had never considered before. The world I had known was slipping away, piece by piece. I was on the edge of something unimaginable, feminization to survive, a transformation that my mind had never been prepared for. Every breath, every heartbeat, every glance in the mirror was a negotiation between fear and necessity, between identity and survival. The journey had begun, but the path ahead was uncharted. The days after my first estrogen injection felt strangely quiet, almost deceptively calm. I kept expecting a dramatic change overnight, a body I wouldn't recognize, but the transformation came in whispers rather than shouts. My chest felt tender, a subtle swelling that made the most ordinary movements a little sharper in awareness. My jeans clung differently to my hips, curving where they had once been straight. Every glance in the mirror reminded me that the reflection staring back was no longer entirely Edwin. I avoided mirrors when I could, stealing quick glimpses instead, afraid of confirming what I both wanted and dreaded to see. Each morning, brushing my teeth, washing my face, I noticed the softening lines, the rounding of my jaw, the subtle shift in my shoulders. My hair seemed shinier, softer. My skin, delicate and hypersensitive, responded to even the gentlest touch. Outside, the world began to feel different. Walking through the grocery store, I noticed how people looked at me differently, subtle glances, lingering for just a moment too long. I wasn't sure if it was me imagining it, or if my body really broadcasted change in a way I hadn't anticipated. Social interactions became a minefield. The casual nods of recognition from neighbors now seemed loaded, uncertain, like they sensed the discrepancy between the person I had been and the person I was becoming. One afternoon, I wandered through a department store, trying to distract myself from the mounting anxiety at home. My hands trembled as I touched fabrics, scanning racks of clothing that seemed foreign and alien. Men's clothes hung awkwardly. The cuts emphasized what my body was subtly losing, what it was gently gaining. A sales associate, noticing my hesitation, approached. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, her voice kind. I shook my head at first, words stuck in my throat. My body, I'm going through changes, I stammered, almost ashamed. The associate smiled, a warmth in her eyes that made my chest tighten. "I can help. I work with all body types, and sometimes bodies change in ways our old clothes don't accommodate. No judgment." She led me to a section of looser-fitting shirts and elastic waist pants. Tentatively, I tried on a few outfits in the fitting room. The jeans fit differently, the shirts draped in unexpected ways. I caught sight of my reflection and froze. My hips curved more than I remembered. My chest protruded subtly beneath the fabric, softening the lines that had once been rigidly masculine. I opened the door slightly. "Not great," I admitted, my voice muffled through the door. "Would you like to try something different? Something that matches your body more comfortably?" the associate asked, gentle and patient. I hesitated, then nodded. She guided me toward the women's section, chatting casually about fabric and fit, making the situation feel less monumental than it truly was. A soft pink blouse and gray pencil skirt were selected, colors neutral yet unexpectedly flattering. Sliding the blouse on, the fabric felt impossibly soft against my sensitive skin. The fit was correct, proper across the chest, accommodating the subtle growth without pinching or gaping. The skirt, elastic at the waist, moved with my changing hips, modest and comfortable. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of alignment between body and clothing, between what I was becoming and what the world would now see. I left the store with several outfits tucked carefully under my arm. Back in my apartment, I hung them in the closet, staring at them with a strange mix of awe and apprehension. These were not just clothes, they were markers of change, symbols of a journey I had not chosen but could no longer avoid. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, trying on the pink blouse and gray skirt. My hands trembled as I adjusted the fabric. The reflection that stared back was Michaela more than Edwin, a stranger and yet undeniably me. The transition was no longer just medical, it was now social, a reshaping of identity in the world outside my apartment. Each day brought subtle shifts. A tender chest, a slight rounding of the hips, the softening of my jawline. Emotions that had been muted surged unexpectedly. Laughter at a TV show, tears at a commercial, anger flaring and dissipating in moments. I was becoming attuned to my body in ways I had never known, discovering the delicate balance of vulnerability and strength in each transformation. Even with these small victories, anxiety lingered. The world outside remained unpredictable. Bathrooms were fraught with tension. Coworkers' glances carried new weight. I oscillated between excitement at the alignment of my body and fear of social rejection. Each interaction, each new step in public, became a negotiation between who I was inside and who my body now presented to the world. Yet, even amidst the discomfort, I began to sense something fragile but profound. Possibility. A glimpse of life lived more fully, with a body that would survive, a mind that would adapt, and perhaps even a spirit that could finally breathe free. The next morning, I woke with a sense of quiet dread, a knot twisting in my stomach. Today, I had to leave the safety of my apartment and face the world outside, the world that knew me as Edwin. As I buttoned my pink blouse and adjusted the gray pencil skirt, my hand shook. Each movement felt deliberate, heavy with meaning. This wasn't just clothing, it was a statement, a declaration of change I was not yet ready to fully own. I called my sister, Rachel, hesitant and unsure if I could even speak the words aloud. I need to tell you something, I stammered. Sit down.
Breathe.
Tell me, she said firmly, yet gently. I explained, my voice trembling, the diagnosis, the autoimmune crisis, and the medical necessity of estrogen therapy. Rachel listened, her hands clasped tightly together. Her eyes widened as she processed the story, but she didn't interrupt. For the first time in months, I felt heard, not pitted, not judged, simply heard. "You're alive," she said softly. "That's what matters. The rest we can handle." Her words brought a mix of relief and dread. Alive, but at what cost? My reflection in the mirror stared back with soft, rounded features and brown hair that now grazed my shoulders. I was still me in memory, in spirit, but my body had begun a transformation that demanded acknowledgement. Work was another challenge entirely. My office had been kind enough to accommodate Edwin's health needs, but explaining that Edwin was now Michaela required a level of vulnerability I wasn't certain I possessed. I rehearsed my words in the mirror, practicing the pronunciation of Michaela and the feminine pronouns I was now asking people to use. Walking through the office doors felt surreal. Coworkers glanced up, some with curiosity, some with recognition, others unsure how to react. I felt like a stranger in a familiar place. My manager, understanding but pragmatic, approached me. "Are you ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I whispered. Introducing myself as Michaela felt both terrifying and liberating. The name rolled off my tongue awkwardly at first, foreign yet fitting. One by one, I explained the situation to my colleagues. Some struggled with the adjustment, fumbling pronouns and expressions. Others, surprisingly, adapted quickly, nodding and smiling with genuine support. The social shift was immediate, yet subtle. Conversations changed, the air in the room shifted, and I became acutely aware of my presence in new ways. Family dinners posed a different set of challenges. Sitting across from Rachel, my parents, and other relatives, I noticed every glance, every pause, every hesitation. Even in the safety of loved ones, I felt the weight of judgment, both perceived and real. Rachel, ever my anchor, guided me through conversations, subtly redirecting attention and offering gentle explanations. "It's not just about looks," she whispered one evening. "It's about survival, about you being here, being healthy. Let people see you for who you are now, Michaela, not who you were before." Her words echoed in my mind as I navigated social spaces over the next weeks. Grocery stores, cafes, even casual walks down the street became exercises in awareness. I noticed the way people looked at me differently now, some with curiosity, some with acceptance, some with barely concealed judgment. Each interaction required a recalibration of self, a negotiation between inner identity and outer perception. Yet there were moments of surprising grace. A barista, after learning my name, smiled warmly. "Michaela," she said, as if pronouncing it correctly mattered more than anything else in the world. A neighbor complimented my floral blouse without hesitation, an innocent acknowledgement of who I was becoming. These small validations built upon one another, tiny bricks of confidence that allowed me to stand taller, breathe easier, and begin to inhabit my new reality. Even with these small victories, internal conflict remained constant. I was alive, thriving physically in a way Edwin could never have been, yet emotionally and mentally, I struggled to reconcile the old self with the new. Every glance in the mirror reminded me of what had been lost, but also of what had been gained: health, vitality, and a second chance at life. Michaela was emerging not just in body, but in mind. And while the world around me adapted slowly, days turned into weeks, and I found myself standing longer in front of the mirror each morning. The reflection staring back wasn't Edwin anymore. It was Michaela. Soft, yet unfamiliar. Curves that had never existed now defined my silhouette. Brown hair flowed past my shoulders, catching the sunlight and reflecting the health my old self had never known. Each day, each glance in the mirror became a meditation in self-discovery. At first, it was unsettling. My mind wanted to cling to Edwin, to the identity that had shaped me for decades. Yet my body refused to lie. Every movement, every shift of weight in my new hips, every gentle sway of my growing chest reminded me that survival had demanded change. I began experimenting with styles, textures, and colors I had never considered before. Fabrics that were soft, flowing, and delicate, yet strong in their presence. The pinks, blues, and lilacs I wore made me feel seen in ways I hadn't experienced as Edwin. Shopping trips became personal pilgrimages. Monica, the store associate who had once guided me timidly through the women's section, now smiled knowingly as I entered. "Back for more?" she asked casually. Her casual tone made me feel less like an anomaly and more like a person navigating life. I selected dresses with flowing skirts, cardigans in soft pastels, and blouses with delicate patterns. I touched each fabric carefully, imagining how it would move with my body, how it would feel against skin that had become softer, more sensitive. The process was not just physical, it was psychological. Each outfit, each combination of colors, became a statement. Michaela was here, fully, unapologetically. I noticed a subtle shift in how I carried myself. My shoulders, once slumped under the weight of illness and self-doubt, lifted. My steps, though cautious at first, gained a rhythm that matched the confidence blooming inside me. But with these small victories came moments of doubt. Passing by groups of men on the street, hearing whispers, feeling eyes linger too long. These experiences reminded me of vulnerability. I questioned myself, could I navigate the world safely in this body? Would people ever see past the surface to who I truly was? The fear lingered, but it no longer dominated my thoughts. Each day I reminded myself, my body had fought to survive. Now it was my mind's turn to catch up. Family dynamics continued to evolve. Rachel became my confidant, my anchor in the storm of adaptation. She encouraged me to embrace the feminine pronouns, to stop hiding under borrowed masculinity. "It's not about losing Edwin," she said one evening as we sipped tea in her cozy kitchen. "It's about allowing Michaela to live." Her words resonated, and slowly, I let myself feel pride in who I was becoming. The world of work mirrored this evolution. My colleagues, initially cautious, began to accept the transition with surprising ease. Casual remarks, friendly smiles, and the simple use of my chosen name built a bridge between my internal identity and external perception. Each interaction was a lesson in vulnerability, resilience, and the quiet power of authenticity. One day, standing before a mirror in a boutique, I allowed myself a rare, unguarded moment. I wore a lavender dress with delicate floral embroidery, my hair brushed loosely around my shoulders. For the first time, I didn't just see the body, I saw myself. Not as a shadow of Edwin, not as a temporary reflection of survival, but as a whole, living, breathing person. Michaela had arrived, fully and unmistakably. The journey was far from over. Each day brought new challenges, public perception, the lingering echoes of my former identity, and the ongoing process of learning to inhabit a body so radically different from the one I had known. Yet, with every challenge, I discovered resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Each step forward was a quiet victory, a celebration of life, health, and the opportunity to truly be myself. Through this deepening transformation, I began to understand a profound truth. The body and mind are intertwined, yet they are not always in harmony. Sometimes survival demands adaptation, but thriving requires acceptance. Michaela was no longer just a response to illness. She was the culmination of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of self-discovery. Months passed, and I began to feel a stability I had never known as Edwin. My health was no longer a daily threat. My body responded perfectly to estrogen, and my wardrobe had become an extension of my personality rather than a foreign experiment. But one quiet thought lingered: unspoken love. Could someone see Michaela not just as a survivor, but as a woman worth being loved? Online dating felt like stepping into a new world. Profiles blurred past my eyes, some honest, some artificial, some terrifyingly judgmental. I hesitated before typing my own. "Michaela," I wrote simply, mentioning my medical history up front. Honesty felt like a shield, a way to protect both myself and anyone I might meet. I included a few photos. One in a soft blue sundress, another with my hair loose, catching sunlight, and a third smiling genuinely at a small cafe. David's message came quickly, a thoughtful, measured introduction. "Hi, Michaela. I'd love to hear more about your story if you feel comfortable sharing," he wrote. There was a gentleness in his words, a patience that felt rare. We began talking daily, slowly peeling back the layers of our lives. He asked questions with curiosity, not judgment, listening to my story of illness, survival, and transformation with genuine compassion. Our first date was at a quiet cafe on a spring afternoon. I wore a dress patterned with white flowers on soft lavender, hair cascading around my shoulders. My hands trembled slightly as I approached the table. David stood, smiling warmly, and offered a simple compliment. "You look radiant." My chest tightened, not from the dress, but from feeling truly seen for the first time. Conversation flowed naturally. We spoke of mundane things first, favorite books, movies, music. Then, cautiously, the deeper parts of our stories emerged. I shared the journey from Edwin to Michaela, the fear, the uncertainty, the relief. He listened intently, asking questions that reflected understanding rather than pity. For the first time in my life, I felt that vulnerability could be met with genuine care rather than judgment. With David, Michaela felt alive in ways Edwin had never imagined. Laughter came more easily. Smiles lingered longer, and quiet touches, hands brushing accidentally across the table, sent warmth through me that was more profound than any physical sensation. I realized that connection wasn't about shared history. It was about mutual respect, trust, and the willingness to embrace each other fully, flaws and all. Over the weeks, our relationship deepened. We explored parks, art galleries, and quiet streets, learning the rhythm of each other's presence. Each time I held his hand, I felt a tether to this new world of possibility. The world hadn't changed, but my place in it had. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was merely surviving, I was living. David's patience allowed me to reconcile Michaela's public identity with my private self. I no longer feared the eyes that lingered too long, or the whispers that once made me anxious. Love became a sanctuary, a place where my body and mind were acknowledged together, where past trauma didn't define future happiness. And as our relationship progressed, I began to feel ready for deeper commitments, emotional, romantic, and eventually lifelong. Yet, the journey was not without moments of self-doubt. Occasionally, I caught myself thinking, would he have stayed if he knew the full extent of my past? Each time, David's steady presence reminded me that survival and transformation were not obstacles to love. They were the foundation. My past had forged Michaela, and Michaela deserved to be loved fully. By the third month, David asked me to meet his friends, and then, gradually, his family. With each introduction, I felt Michaela solidifying, confident in her body, voice, and identity. Public acceptance mirrored my internal acceptance, and I learned that vulnerability could coexist with strength. I wasn't just a patient who had survived a medical crisis. I was a woman who had reclaimed her life and found someone willing to walk beside her, not despite her journey, but because of it. One evening, walking hand in hand along a quiet street, David looked at me and said, "I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now, and I think you're amazing." His words resonated deeper than any compliment on appearance or achievement. This was love without conditions, love that recognized survival and celebrated authenticity. For the first time, I let myself believe it. Michaela was not just alive, she was lovable, desirable, and complete. By now, Michaela had settled into a rhythm that once seemed impossible. The initial shock of physical transformation had faded, replaced with a growing sense of self that extended far beyond the mirror. Her body had adapted beautifully to estrogen, but it was the world outside that posed the real challenge. Social integration was a labyrinth of small victories, subtle anxieties, and unexpected affirmations. Work became the first real test. Returning to the office, Michaela felt a flutter of nerves she hadn't experienced since her diagnosis. Would her colleagues accept her? Would clients treat her differently? On her first day back, she chose a soft cream blouse paired with a muted floral skirt, professional yet feminine, her brown hair neatly brushed. She walked through the doors with measured steps, heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear. To her relief, reactions were overwhelmingly positive. Colleagues adjusted to the new pronouns quickly, some expressing genuine curiosity about her journey. "Thanks for explaining everything," one coworker said. "It makes sense now." Another joked, "Looks like someone finally figured out how to dress well." Light laughter rippled through the office, a gentle reminder that connection often comes through shared humor and empathy. Michaela felt a warmth bloom inside, a validation not just of her appearance, but of her presence. Outside work, Michaela discovered a newfound ease in everyday social interactions. Simple encounters, the barista who remembered her name, the neighbor who complimented her dress, shifted from minor events to affirmations of belonging. Each acknowledgement reinforced a truth she was still learning to accept. She belonged fully in this world, not as a shadow of Edwin, but as Michaela. Friendships, however, posed a subtler challenge. Longtime acquaintances often struggled with pronouns, accidentally reverting to old habits. Michaela approached each situation with patience, using humor or gentle correction. "I know it's an adjustment," she said once to a friend, "but Michaela feels better than Edwin ever did." Most adapted quickly, and the experience became less about frustration and more about teaching, guiding others to respect her identity. Even mundane public interactions offered lessons in confidence. Using public restrooms remained a sensitive area. Initially, Michaela experienced lingering anxiety entering women's facilities, memories of judgment flashing across her mind. But over time, she learned to navigate these spaces with calm assurance. A polite smile, quiet confidence, and unshakable self-awareness gradually silenced the whispers and stares. Her presence became unremarkable, normalized by the very authenticity she had fought to embrace. Fashion, once a source of uncertainty, transformed into a language of self-expression. Michaela experimented with color palettes, textures, and cuts, finding joy in floral patterns, flowing skirts, and soft cardigans that complemented her body's natural curves. Accessories, scarves, delicate jewelry, and tasteful handbags became extensions of her personality, each choice a statement of confidence and individuality. Clothing was no longer a mask, but a celebration of identity. At home, life stabilized into comforting routines. David became a partner in shared domesticity, navigating meals, chores, and quiet evenings with an ease that reinforced Michaela's sense of normalcy. Evenings spent cooking together, laughing over small mishaps, or quietly reading in the living room reflected a life once unimaginable. Each shared moment was a small triumph over the isolation and fear that had dominated Edwin's final months. Michaela also reconnected with her family, particularly Rachel. Their bond, tested by the turbulence of illness and transformation, strengthened over time. Rachel admired Michaela's courage, often remarking on her poise and elegance. Weekend dinners became opportunities for laughter, storytelling, and emotional reconnection. Family support, Michaela realized, was as vital to thriving as any medical treatment. Acceptance from those closest to her cemented her confidence. Community engagement became another facet of her growth. Michaela began attending support groups and speaking at medical events, sharing her story to inspire and educate. Her presence provided reassurance to those navigating similar transitions, illustrating that transformation, even involuntary, could lead to thriving. Public speaking initially sparked nerves, but with each talk, Michaela discovered a voice strong, composed, and empathetic. Her journey became a bridge for others, a testament to resilience and self-acceptance. Yet, Michaela understood that confidence was not linear. Some days brought insecurity, old habits, lingering doubts, or fleeting discomfort with her reflection. But the pattern of support, self-compassion, and practical adaptation helped her navigate these moments. Each challenge overcame reinforced the lesson. Michaela was no longer merely surviving. She was learning to inhabit the world fully, embracing her body, her style, and her identity with grace. By the end of this period, Michaela could move through daily life with a quiet certainty. Shopping, commuting, dining, or attending events felt less like tests and more like expressions of existence. Confidence was no longer performative. It was intrinsic, a product of understanding and accepting her body, her past, and her new reality. Michaela wasn't just surviving in the world. She was living as a woman who had claimed every aspect of her life. Life, Michaela quickly realized, was rarely linear, even after conquering the medical hurdles that had almost claimed her life. Each day offered new lessons, and each encounter carried the potential to affirm or challenge the identity she was painstakingly embracing. Survival had been the first victory. Thriving would be measured in subtler, more personal ways. The most immediate challenge came in the form of societal perception. Despite her confident exterior, Michaela encountered subtle prejudices, unsolicited opinions, and moments of unintentional judgment. Walking down the street, she sometimes caught strangers staring, eyes narrowing as if silently questioning her presence. A few rude remarks surfaced in casual conversations, testing her patience. She learned early on that her body's authenticity invited curiosity and, occasionally, scrutiny. One afternoon, at a local cafe, a man whispered loudly enough for her to hear, "That's not a real woman." Michaela's chest tightened, old fears, dormant but never gone, surged to the surface. Her first instinct was retreat, to shrink into invisibility. But instead, she met the comment with quiet composure. She smiled politely and continued ordering her coffee. In that moment, she understood a crucial truth. Her power lay not in convincing others of her reality, but in fully inhabiting it herself. Work, too, brought unanticipated hurdles. While most colleagues adapted quickly, some struggled with pronouns or unintentionally clung to old perceptions. A major project presentation became a test of resilience when a client questioned her qualifications, subtly implying that her transition made her less professional. Michaela felt a flicker of doubt, a whisper of old insecurities she thought were long buried. But she steadied herself, presenting data, insights, and strategy with precision and poise. By the end, not only had she silenced doubt, but she had also earned a newfound respect from even the most skeptical attendees. Triumph, she realized, often came cloaked in trials. Even personal relationships were a labyrinth of nuance. David, her partner, was supportive beyond measure, yet Michaela still wrestled with moments of vulnerability. Nights spent lying awake, hair tangled around her shoulders, thoughts raced. Would love endure in the face of constant change? Could intimacy survive the lingering shadows of Edwin? Each time, David's presence grounded her. Gentle words, steady hands, and shared laughter reminded Michaela that identity and love were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist, thriving in tandem. Family dynamics remained both sanctuary and arena. Rachel, unwavering in support, sometimes pushed Michaela to confront uncomfortable truths. "You're doing so well," she said one evening, "but are you fully letting yourself be Michaela? Or are you still holding on to Edwin?" The question struck deep. Michaela realized that while her body had adapted, her mind occasionally lingered in the past. Accepting herself meant releasing not just societal expectations, but also the memory of who she once was. It was a painful, yet essential, form of growth. Public spaces tested Michaela's courage daily. Bathrooms, social gatherings, and casual outings required constant self-assertion. Occasionally, she faced overt hostility, a man following her out of the women's restroom, a passerby shouting an insult. But these moments, while jarring, also revealed her inner strength. Michaela learned the art of resilience, assertiveness without aggression, visibility without fear. Each confrontation became a subtle victory, reinforcing her sense of belonging. Through it all, fashion remained a sanctuary. Clothing, once a source of anxiety, had transformed into armor and celebration. Michaela delighted in blending functionality with personal expression, flowing dresses for confidence, cardigans for comfort, subtle accessories for individuality. She discovered the joy of experimenting with color and texture, embracing her femininity as an intrinsic part of identity rather than a performative mask. Each morning's outfit became a small ritual of empowerment, a reminder that she could claim beauty on her own terms. Amid challenges, Michaela found triumph in community. Support groups, online networks, and medical forums offered connection with individuals navigating similar journeys. Sharing stories, offering advice, and celebrating milestones with peers transformed isolation into solidarity. She realized that her struggles, while uniquely hers, were also threads in a larger tapestry of human resilience. Her voice, once silent in fear, now carried weight, hope, and guidance. Emotionally, Michaela learned to embrace complexity. There were days of sorrow, nostalgia, and subtle regret for what she had lost, moments where Edwin's shadow lingered, but these were balanced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude and empowerment. Each challenge she overcame reinforced the lesson that identity, like survival, was not merely a state but an ongoing process. Thriving meant acknowledging vulnerability while cultivating strength. It meant celebrating victories, however small, and honoring progress, however incremental. Ultimately, Michaela emerged from these trials transformed in more ways than one. The world had tested her resolve, questioned her legitimacy, and exposed her vulnerabilities. Yet she had met each challenge with courage, adaptability, and unwavering self-respect. Triumph was not merely survival, it was integration, alignment, and the quiet joy of existing authentically. Michaela realized that the body that once rejected testosterone had not only saved her life, but also propelled her toward a fuller, richer existence than she had ever imagined. Years rolled forward, each one layering Michaela's life with experiences that once would have seemed unimaginable. The passage of time brought not merely the routine of survival, but the fullness of thriving, health, love, purpose, and family. Michaela had fully embraced herself, the woman her body had always required, and in doing so, she discovered a richness to life she had never known. Her relationship with David deepened with each passing year. What had begun as tentative, careful love blossomed into a bond of trust, laughter, and intimacy that embraced both past struggles and present joys. They navigated life's milestones together, celebrating birthdays, planning vacations, hosting gatherings with friends and family. Every shared memory, every quiet evening at home, reinforced the foundation of love that had helped Michaela anchor herself during the turbulence of her transition. Family became the heart of her world. Rachel remained a constant pillar, witnessing Michaela's journey from the frightened Edwin to the confident woman she had become. Their bond evolved into something profound, a friendship of equals, seasoned with understanding, shared laughter, and mutual respect. Rachel's early insistence on facing difficult truths had helped Michaela shed the last remnants of self-doubt, and now, years later, their relationship was effortless, filled with warmth and humor. Michaela and David's adoption of Emma marked another turning point, a chapter of motherhood that was both rewarding and challenging. Guiding a child through her early years, imparting lessons in resilience, empathy, and honesty, Michaela felt a sense of purpose that complemented her personal growth. Emma thrived, curious and spirited, her laughter filling the home with light. Michaela loved sharing her story in age-appropriate ways, teaching her daughter that life could offer second chances and that identity, in all its forms, was something to celebrate rather than hide. Professionally, Michaela's experience positioned her as a voice of authority and compassion in medical advocacy. She spoke at hospitals and conferences, contributed to research, and consulted on cases similar to her own. Her unique perspective, blending personal experience with medical understanding, became invaluable. She published articles, mentored young patients facing transitions, and offered guidance to those navigating complex medical landscapes. Michaela had transformed what had once been a terrifying crisis into a platform for positive change, touching countless lives with her insight and empathy. Her personal style remained a joyful expression of identity. Floral dresses, soft cardigans, and practical yet elegant footwear became her signature, a visible manifestation of her inner harmony. Even as her hair began to streak with silver, she wore it long and free, a reminder of the continuity of self and the beauty of aging authentically. Clothing, once a source of uncertainty, had become a tool for affirmation and celebration, reinforcing the alignment between who she was inside and how she presented herself to the world. Michaela's body, now thriving on estrogen, had stabilized completely. Regular checkups with Dr. Martinez and her successors confirmed that her organs, once threatened by the autoimmune condition, were functioning optimally. Michaela had become a living testament to medical resilience, a case study cited in journals, a symbol of hope for those facing similarly rare conditions. Yet the greatest miracle, she reflected, was not merely survival, but the joy and fulfillment she had cultivated in life beyond illness. Socially, Michaela navigated the world with grace and confidence. She had learned to face curiosity, skepticism, and even hostility with composure, understanding that the power of authenticity often silenced doubts without confrontation. Public spaces, once intimidating, became arenas of quiet empowerment. She handled misgendering, inappropriate questions, and invasive stares with patience and poise, educating when necessary, smiling when she could, and prioritizing her own comfort and well-being above all. Romantic life had also flourished. Dating after her transition, Michaela discovered a spectrum of experiences, from rejection to deep connection. Meeting David had been serendipitous. He valued her for her intelligence, humor, resilience, and heart, not merely her appearance. Their love demonstrated that genuine connection transcends superficial boundaries and that embracing authenticity attracts people who truly align with your essence. As the years accumulated, Michaela reflected often on the journey from Edwin to herself. The terrified man she once was had faded into memory, replaced by someone fully present, fully alive, and fully herself. Each challenge, each painful adjustment, and each societal barrier had contributed to a resilience that defined her today. Michaela had not simply survived a rare autoimmune crisis. She had evolved, building a life rich in love, purpose, and fulfillment. Through mentorship and advocacy, she ensured that her story continued to impact others. Young patients facing hormone-dependent medical conditions found guidance and hope in her words. Medical professionals learned from her lived experience, enriching their understanding of patient care. Communities of transgender and medically transitioning individuals drew strength from her example, seeing in her life proof that survival could lead to thriving and that transformation, however forced by circumstance, could become an opportunity for discovery and joy. Even in quiet moments, Michaela celebrated life's ordinary wonders. A sunrise over the city skyline, the sound of laughter at dinner, the warmth of a hug from David or Emma, each moment was a testament to the journey she had endured. The body that had once rejected testosterone and threatened her existence now carried her through decades of health, love, and fulfillment. Michaela no longer saw the transition as a loss, but as a gateway to a richer, more authentic existence. In her later years, Michaela's influence endured. She became a mentor, a storyteller, and a living emblem of resilience. Her home, filled with warmth, books, and soft fabrics, reflected a life fully embraced. Emma grew into a thoughtful, compassionate adult, inspired by the example of her mother's courage and authenticity. Michaela watched, quietly proud, knowing that the lessons she had learned, the importance of listening to one's body, embracing truth, and pursuing joy despite fear, would ripple into the next generation. Finally, Michaela understood that her story was not defined by illness, transition, or external judgment, but by choice, her daily, conscious choice to inhabit her truth fully. Each floral dress, each moment of laughter, each small act of care and resilience was a testament to a life reclaimed. The man who had once faced a lethal diagnosis had been replaced by a woman who lived vibrantly, authentically, and courageously. She often smiled when recalling Edwin, the frightened man in Dr. Martinez's office. Without that crisis, she wondered, would she have ever discovered Michaela? Perhaps not. Perhaps the body that had tried to kill Edwin had, in its own way, saved Michaela. And in that realization lay the essence of her legacy. Transformation, whether medical, emotional, or social, could be more than survival. It could be rebirth, joy, and a life fully, irrevocably lived. Michaela, fully herself, surrounded by family, thriving professionally, and respected by her community, had created a life of meaning and beauty. Her story was a reminder that even the most extraordinary challenges could yield unimaginable rewards, and that embracing change, however daunting, often led to the most authentic and fulfilling existence imaginable. There are moments in life when everything becomes quiet, so quiet that you can finally hear yourself breathe. I stood by the window that evening, warm golden light spilling across the floorboards, the city stretching far beyond my balcony like a living heartbeat. The years had softened the edges of my memories, but some details remained vivid. Hospital lights, trembling hands, diagnoses that shattered the world I once knew. Now, as I watched Emma laugh downstairs with David, my heart carried none of that fear. Only gratitude. Deep, quiet gratitude. It took me decades to understand that the universe hadn't punished me. It had rerouted me, redirected me, guided me toward the version of myself I was too afraid to even imagine. The truth was simple. Edwin had never truly lived. He had survived, endured, adapted. But he hadn't lived. I did. Michaela lived. I think about the early days often, those first tremors of identity, the panic, the confusion, the blur of medical explanations. The first time I saw myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. The world expects these memories to be agonizing, but strangely, they're not. They feel like old photographs, distant, gently faded, necessary steps in a journey far larger than fear. I touch my hair, still long, now streaked with silver, and smile at the reflection beside me. The woman in the mirror looks nothing like Edwin, yet she carries all of his memories. His fears, his hopes, his mistakes, his resilience. They didn't disappear. They matured inside me, like a seed waiting for the right season to bloom. People often assume transformation ends once the body aligns. But that's the smallest part. The real metamorphosis happens in the quiet moments, when you forgive who you were, when you embrace who you've become, when you allow joy to enter without questioning whether you deserve it. I breathe deeply, and the air tastes like peace. David joins me at the window, slipping his arm around my waist like it belongs there. Thinking again, he teases softly. Always, I whisper, leaning into his shoulder. He doesn't ask what I'm thinking about. He knows. He always has. Love, I learned, wasn't about understanding every detail. It was about standing beside someone even when the details changed. From the doorway, Emma calls to us, her voice bright and impatient. Mama, movie night. Mama. There was a time that single word startled me. Now, it feels like sunlight pressed directly into my chest. I turn toward her, my daughter, my second chance at life, and I realized something profound. Every version of me had been reaching for this moment. Not perfection, not approval, not validation, just this. A life lived fully, honestly, unapologetically. As we settle onto the couch, Emma resting her head on my lap, David's hand wrapped around mine, I understand the truth I had spent years running from. I was never meant to return to who I was. I was meant to become who I am. And now, finally, peacefully, unquestionably, I am Michaela. Not an accident, not a consequence, not a diagnosis, but a woman who survived, healed, and lived long enough to become the person she was always destined to be. When the movie begins, Emma whispers, "Mama, are you happy?" And without hesitation, without fear, without a trace of the uncertainty that once consumed my soul, I smile and say, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be." Some people believe life moves in straight lines, forward, always forward. But as I grew older, I realized that life moves in circles. Gentle, repeating, widening circles that return us to truths we once ignored, people we once needed, and versions of ourselves we once abandoned. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was cleaning out an old wooden chest, something I hadn't opened in years. Dust floated in the sunlight like soft golden snow, and the hinges creaked as if awakening from a long sleep. Inside were fragments of a life I barely recognized, photographs, papers, childhood drawings, memories that belonged to someone I used to be. On top of everything lay a small, frayed notebook. Edwin's handwriting sprawled across the first page. I froze. It felt like touching a ghost. For almost a minute, I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. Inside were letters Edwin had written to himself during the early stages of the illness, back when he still believed everything could go back to normal. Back when he still thought this was temporary. Don't forget who you are. Stay strong. You'll wake up from this. My chest tightened. Those pages smelled like old paper and lost years. It was strange, reading words from a life I remember living, yet feeling as if they were written by someone else entirely. Someone I used to carry inside me but no longer resembled. I closed the notebook gently, almost tenderly, and whispered into the quiet room. Thank you. Not out of sadness. Out of respect. Edwin wasn't my enemy. He wasn't a mistake. He was the foundation I rose from, the past version of myself who tried his best with the limited understanding he had. He endured the pain, confusion, and fear so that I could live freely, boldly, beautifully. As I placed the notebook back into the chest, I noticed something underneath, a folded piece of paper, a medical report, the one that changed everything, my diagnosis. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My breath felt heavy, almost thick, and the edges of the paper trembled slightly between my fingers. This single document had rerouted my destiny, reshaped my identity, broken me apart, and rebuilt me stronger. It didn't feel like a tragedy anymore. It felt like a beginning, a rebirth disguised as an ending. I put it aside and continued digging through the chest. Beneath old clothes and forgotten souvenirs, I found something I hadn't expected at all, a pair of Edwin's old shirts. Plain, faded, emotionally empty. I ran a hand across the fabric. It felt stiff, unfamiliar, like touching the skin of a stranger. The shirts didn't feel like home. They didn't even feel like mine. And for the first time, I understood something I had never said aloud. I had not lost myself. I had simply grown out of myself, just like a child grows out of clothes they once loved. I folded the shirts slowly, thoughtfully, and placed them in a donation box. Not with sadness, with gratitude. Because holding on to them all these years had been like holding on to a shadow. And letting them go felt like opening a window in a room I had been afraid to enter. When I finished cleaning, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The wind was soft, carrying the scent of jasmine from the street below. Life hummed around me, cars passing, children laughing, the distant chime of a bicycle bell. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. And in that moment I felt it, a complete, gentle, effortless peace. The circles of my life had returned me here. To a woman I had chosen. To a life I had built. To a future I had earned. To a truth I no longer questioned. I wasn't running from Edwin anymore. I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I wasn't trying to validate my existence or justify my transformation. I was simply living. Living beautifully, quietly, confidently. When I went inside, Emma came running toward me, her arms wide, her smile bright. Mama, look, I drew something for you. I scooped her up, and her small hands cupped my face. Her eyes sparkled. Do you like it? The drawing was messy, colorful, imperfect, two stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small, a heart above their heads. It's us, she giggled. You're the prettiest mama in the world. I felt my throat tighten. Years ago, I had stared at my reflection and wondered if I would ever feel complete, if I could ever feel like myself again. Now, hearing my daughter's voice, feeling her warmth in my arms, I knew the answer. I didn't just find myself. I built myself. Piece by piece. Choice by choice. Day by day. And the woman I became, she was whole. She was loved. She was enough. I kissed Emma's forehead and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. I love it. And I love the life we've built together." And as she laughed and ran off into the living room, the last puzzle piece of my story gently clicked into place. Life hadn't just come full circle. It had come beautifully, perfectly, unmistakably home. When everyone finally fell asleep that night, the house settled into that familiar, comforting silence. I walked out onto the balcony alone, the cool air brushing against my skin, the moonlight painting my world silver. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. Not from my past. Not from the body I lost. Not from the identity I once clung to like a shield. Not from the fear that I wouldn't be enough. I leaned against the railing and let the breeze lift my hair. It wasn't just hair anymore. It was proof. Proof that I survived. Proof that I adapted. Proof that I transformed in ways no one, not even I, expected. Behind me, the door creaked softly. Emma's footsteps. "Mama," her tiny, sleepy voice whispered. I turned, instantly softening. She rubbed her eyes, hugging her blanket. "I can't sleep. Can I stay with you?" I knelt down and opened my arms. She walked straight into my embrace, like she always had, like she always would. Her head rested on my shoulder, and I rocked her gently, each motion melting something old inside me, something I once swore would never heal. "Mama," she murmured again. "Yes, sweetheart. You're the best mama in the world." My breath caught. For a moment, everything blurred. The city lights, the moon, even time itself. Because that sentence, that one simple sentence, it was the final piece I didn't know I was missing. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm the best I can be because of you." When I carried her back inside and tucked her into bed, I realized something profound. I had stopped trying to prove who I was. I had simply become her. And that was enough. I walked back to the balcony one last time, letting the night wrap around me like a soft shawl. I closed the door gently behind me, a real, physical door, but symbolically so much more. It was the last door Edwin had ever touched. On the balcony, I whispered into the wind, "Thank you for ending. And thank you for beginning." I placed my hand on my chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath. A woman's heartbeat. A survivor's heartbeat. A mother's heartbeat. My heartbeat. And with the moon watching over me, I smiled. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my life. And this is my ending. But endings don't mean the story stops. They simply mean I'm ready for whatever comes next.